Look, on Leadership Now, I promised never to do commercials, but here we are. Why? Well, I have a new book in the works. It's coming out spring 2026, and I wanted to give you an advance heads up about it. The title, The Future of Work is Gray, and it's kind of a big deal to me because the book dives into the age crisis that's reshaping work as we know it. It's something that I call age debt, but spoiler alert, it does turn into some solution. There's some hope, there's some positive, and that's called the experience dividend. So if your workplace still thinks that age is a liability, well, it's time to retire that mindset. In fact, we might want to retire the word retire. So yeah, I don't do ads. This is a special occasion, and for it, I am willing to go gray. And maybe Grey Goose will sponsor me, not sure. Anyway, spring 2026, the future of work is gray. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Daniel Pontefract, in the house, an M&A love guru. That's what I'm going to call you, Jennifer. So short bio, Jennifer, and then we're going to get right into it. So Jennifer Fondrevay. Jennifer is a founder and chief humanity officer, that says it all, of Day1 Ready, which is a consultancy dedicated to guiding forward-thinking business leaders, owners, and C-suite executives through the human capital challenges inherent in mergers and acquisitions, herein known as M&A going forward. With a rich background as a Fortune 500 C-suite exec, Jennifer has firsthand experience leading teams through multiple multi-billion-dollar acquisitions. These experiences inspired her to author the best-selling and acerbic book, Now What? A Survivor's Guide for Thriving Through Mergers and Acquisitions, which has been acclaimed for its insightful approach to navigating corporate change through M&A. Jennifer's experience is widely recognized with contributions to publications everywhere and in between: HBR, Fast Company, Inc., Forbes. She's been on the old telly as well on CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox News, and so on, where she shares her perspectives on leadership and organizational transformation related to M&A. Ultimately, Jennifer, you are an advocate for the power and interest in what you and I call human-centric approach, ultimately, to business transformation through this M&A activity that you do, where employees, Jennifer, are at the heart of change. And this is where we want to start.
What a shock,
M&A,
right? What a shock.
I know. I mean, you and I know each other for a bit. I've divulged how I've been through my own multiple number of M&As. And I think where I love about you is that you come at it first from the human centricity piece, yet this game of M&A is obviously it's a spreadsheet. It's a columns and rows thing. It's about, does it fit and is it financially good for the party, not
Right.
necessarily the parties. And so I want to take a step back and say, okay, tell us a bit about why human-centric thinking needs to be part of M&A when M&A is actually on the rise throughout the world, particularly the US.
Well, for the first answer, because I think there's a couple of reasons why I think it needs to be human-centric, but first and foremost is every company that is going through a merger or an acquisition is trying to transform the company.
Hmm.
They're trying to change it, either add a product, add a new target, add a new audience, add intellectual capital, but they're transforming the company together. That transformation won't happen if you don't have people bought in and ready to contribute to that transformation and understanding the role that they play. So, as you noted, so much of that upfront work is transactional.
Mm.
It's defining the value and forecasting, when can we hit these numbers? All of that is absolutely important. But what I find too often, Dan, and you and I talked about this, is that focus on the transaction tends to exclude what are we doing this for, the transformational aspect, and how are we going to have that happen? Once we get all the numbers and we're clear on that, what then is the people strategy, the
Yeah.
human-centric strategy? How are we going to ensure that buy-in? And that's for me what, frankly, it's why I do what I do. Having gone through, as you noted, multi-billion dollar M&A deals, what I found consistently in my own experience and then the research I did for my book was the people piece, the human-centric piece tends to be secondary. It's too
Yeah.
often an afterthought and not central to the strategy.
Which is so sad, first and foremost, because we're talking with people. Ultimately, it's not just numbers. But I know in the book and just in a lot of your work, you have identified sort of those very common human capital challenges that organizations face. So I do want to get into another acronym, PAI, post-acquisition integration, later. But I want to first like open up Pandora's box a bit about the human capital challenges. So if we're entering into discussions to acquire said company, it reasons to stand for me at least that maybe within the pre-acquisition discussion, we should be talking about employees, people, thoughts on acquisition, like the way in which we need to integrate. Yet, again, it feels as though that we're not adding enough of that human capital piece up front. So, what are these obstacles or challenges? What do you see in your experience that is creating this situation?
Well, it's fascinating. The epiphany moment for me came through a conversation with one CEO in particular for my book. He's the one who frankly said, "You've got to get this book out
Oh
there."
yeah.
Because he said that a big lesson learned for him was when you come to a merger and acquisition, you tend to come with arrogance. It's very ego driven. And he realized that the first few deals that he did as a CEO were not as successful because of that. When he came to the deal with humility and a respect for what that other company was going to bring to his company, he
Mm.
said it set the tone for a much stronger partnership because he was coming to it with respect. And wouldn't you know it, the other side being treated with respect brought that same level of respect to the partnership. And so that
Shocking. What the?
that cascaded down. But he said, and it was confirmed through multiple interviews that I had, right? It just you tend to come to those deal discussions with arrogance. I'm the powerful company. You're lucky to be partnering with us. And he said, when you come with an energy of I've got respect for your company, what you do is so valuable. I think together we'll be that much stronger. When you come with that energy, it has a much more profound impact for the long term because you come to it already showing that respect and valuing each other as a partner. So for me, that human capital aspect for him to acknowledge so much of the attitude that he had in the past, he didn't realize wasn't serving the long-term vision that he had for what the companies were going to be doing post acquisition.
You've triggered some PTSD for me, and sure.
You know what? Lie down. Start talking.
So a short-ish story. So the year is 2007. It's the spring, and at the time, I am working for a company called Business Objects, which is a billion-dollar BI company, and all the BI companies were basically kind of in the market of being acquired by the SAPs, the IBMs, the Microsofts of the day.
Yeah.
And so SAP wound up acquiring business objects. And so I am a site lead in Vancouver of about 1,500 people. And the co-CEOs at the time of SAP come to Vancouver and they're like, hey, we're here to buy you. We're done. The deal wrapped up. We're trying to play nice. And we go out on a boat. So there's me, several other sort of executives, and one of the two co-CEOs of SAP. And so, you're on this boat, and there's about 20 or 25 of us. And so, I went up, obviously, I'm going to be discussing things going forward. And so I said, hey, the good news is that not only did you buy our technology, but you bought a culture. And I was wondering, like, maybe we could have a discussion about all these great people, the 10,000 of us, and the culture, the family we've built. It is kind of amazing. And, I may be around with the team that has helped to create this. And he looked at me as if I was from Mars, Jennifer, and said, um, thank you very much, but we've acquired the company, not the people. I was like, whoo, okie dokie. So I
Yeah.
wanted to jump off
Yeah.
the boat with my PFD, or not actually, and just swim ashore back to Vancouver shoreline. But this is the thing. It's like my point is like there's this myopia, it seems, even though people are involved and feelings and next steps, and there's needing of empathy and all these things that didn't seem to happen on that boat, and certainly within the period of about the 18 months where this whole acquisition happened. So again, where's my question? Well,
No,
there's
but I love that you shared that story because those are the kinds of stories that even CEOs, that HR leaders shared with me that contributed to the book, right? That's when I knew like, oh, it wasn't just me
yeah.
that thought this is odd.
Well, okay, so there's pre and post merger. Well, there's the actual acquisition period itself, but let's go back to pre. So one of the things I really love these days are some good academics and even some good business leaders, et cetera. They're realizing that it's not just good enough to do a post-mortem, that maybe we need to do a pre-mortem.
Yes.
So if PAI is post-acquisition integration, and maybe there's now a new PAI, like the pre-acquisition integration thinking, what are you recommending? What do you see? What are the things that we should be looking out for in pre-acquisition mode?
Well, that pre-mortem exercise is one of the more powerful exercises I do with leaders. I think the best way to frame it in terms of timing is you're walking down the aisle, right? We've pretty
Mhm.
much crossed the T's, dotted the I's, the announcement will be made, and you're doing indirectly a bit of a leadership assessment. Typically, I'm brought in to do leadership alignment to make sure we have a similar vision and we're moving in the right direction. And so the pre-mortem, what I love about it is it brings certainty to what traditionally is all the uncertainty that comes with a merger and acquisition. As you and I have chatted about, things can really look good on paper, but in execution, it can be a completely different ballgame.
Yeah.
And everything. I mean, you know it yourself. We can always manipulate numbers to tell the story we want it to. So paper things are, it's easy to make things look good on paper. But
Yeah.
with a pre-mortem, what I have uncovered each time is essentially the scenario is let's act as though the deal has failed. And
Mm.
let's talk through now as a leadership team together, what would be the reasons that the deal would fail? And we do what I like to call a reverse SWOT analysis, right? What are our strengths that we're assuming? What are weaknesses that we may have, let's say, had a blind spot to because so much of the energy around the transaction is you're looking for things that validate the reason for the transaction. And you tend to discard or put to the side little red flags that might say, we need to pay attention to that. Okay, we will, but we'll pay attention to it later. So I'll say in this pre-mortem, we're looking at our strengths, our weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we look at it holistically, not just the internal things, but externally, right? What are government sanctions,
Mm.
tariffs? What are things that countries could do that aren't in our control that might undermine a lot of assumptions that we made when we were focused purely on the transaction and looking for all the reasons that this is a smart deal to do. And the benefit of that is not only do you have greater clarity, in fact, I've had CEOs consistently come up to me afterwards and say, that's the closest I've ever gotten to having a crystal ball, because not only do I now know where I may have gaps in my knowledge, but I've also gotten a chance to see how this team thinks. What I thought where we had alignment, I actually see we have different reasoning for certain things that I think is overcomable, but now I have greater visibility on that. So greater clarity
Mhm.
uh, as well as understanding the thought process for the team. And frankly, when I've done the exercise with teams where it's a whole day, not only do we identify the challenges and opportunities, but people are assigned. Okay, I think now let's say a government does that. How are we going to prepare for it? And we may never even have to pull the trigger, but I at least have assigned someone to that if that's going to happen. And it's a pre-planning exercise as well. You do all the scenario planning. It's why oftentimes people with a military background say to me, "Oh my God, I love this. This is why you do drills in the military, right? You hope to never go to war, but you want to be prepared. You do all the scenario planning, so depending on what could happen, you feel prepared. That's what a pre-mortem can bring to you in a business setting.
So amazing. And I mean, it's it seems to be, however, lost on many executives going through acquisitions because they're jumping to the deal close, and then it's sort
Yes.
of tossed over the fence and like, hey, put these things together now. And so where I want to ask a few more questions about is let's let's assume there's no pre-mortem. Let's assume that that people are doing M&A as they've always done, which is like let's get a deal done in a room, announce
Right.
it, and then hand it over the fence to everyone to go integrate. So there's a corporate culture post-acquisition integration concern that still I see today countless times a year when I work with executives and organizations. And that is like three things basically happen. They're pretty good at pre-mortems and they've actually done something about it and it's a more seamless acquisition integration piece. So let's leave that aside. There are some good examples out there. I know you work with them. But then there's like the other two types I think that I see. And Jennifer, one of course is let's leave them be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything will be fine. We'll deal with it later. Let's just leave them be. Or there's the you got to do it our way, but we're not going to really integrate you. Like, you stay in your systems. We're not going to talk to you really about what your culture is. We're not going to actually ask questions. It's more militaristic, it's authoritarian, but it's sort of like, yeah, we're there to take your EBITDA. We're there to take your whatevers. And maybe there are others, but those are the two that I'm seeing a lot of, rather than other than the good ones. So I'm just curious, like, what's going on with leaders when they do this dump strategy over the fence and like good luck, and or that leave them alone? Like, I know there are two different ones there, but just trying to pick your brain a little bit on this.
Well, and frankly, Dan, that's the reason why it's why I walked away from a very good corporate career, mind you. I was a chief marketing officer and I worked very hard to get to that. But I went through three separate multi-billion dollar deals. I've been on all sides, right? Acquirer, acquiree, acquired by private equity, which is its
Yeah,
own unique
fun.
of, and I consistently saw the scenarios that you're talking about, and I kept thinking to myself, do people not know there's a better way to do this? That there is actually, if you have a strategy and you think about the people piece of this, and it's why I focus so much of my energy on when I call M&A leadership.
Hmm.
Because when your leadership is really good at that growth strategy, right? You've had the up curve and you are trending. That is awesome, right? Those are the companies who, hey, you get acquired because you guys are on a growth tear. But what I see consistently, and Marshall Goldsmith talks about this in his book, right? What got you here won't get you there. Those leaders tend to not recognize that you have to pull different tools out of the leadership toolkit when you are navigating an enormous amount of uncertainty. And I'll say enormous, even if it's not a multi-billion dollar deal, when you've strategized and you've defined on paper what this is going to look like, then you have to test it, right? Now you've got individuals bringing this strategy to life. And if you haven't prepared leadership with exactly as you said, how do you show empathy and compassion and meet people where they are to help them move from where they were,
Mm.
letting go of the old way of doing things to move to a new way of doing things, getting through that messy middle, what William Bridges calls the neutral zone. And so I, for me, it's my passion because I thought we've not prepared leadership for this, and not all leaders are good at navigating that emotional, messy middle. But it's on you as an executive team to say, okay, as we're finalizing this transaction, how do we prepare our leadership? How do we set them up for success so that our frontline leaders are equally prepared for what's to come and how to navigate it?
So, what are some of those leadership behaviors and attitudes that you look for, or that you teach, or that you provide wisdom and experience and consulting on? Like, I'm curious when you're working with organizations, I know you're inferring a modeling that has to happen. There's a behave, there's leadership, right? So, take a bit behind the scenes as to what Jennifer recommends and consults with on how leaders need to adopt these certain behaviors, attitudes, competencies.
Well, it's And I'll say, so my PTSD, Dan, is I was on the receiving end of a lot of consultancies during my merger and acquisition experiences. And I describe it in my book as, these consultancies descend on companies like a swarm of locusts with, sorry for the visual, but with, Excel spreadsheets and PowerPoint templates, and everyone has to fit neatly into a box.
Yeah.
Humans don't fit neatly into boxes. And frankly, I'll say the same people who were your trailblazers, pioneers who disrupted automatically, right? Yeah, now you want them to fit efficiently into a box and do this and follow this way. So I will confess, I came at it from a very different standpoint. And so one of the exercises that I use is we create a playlist. And the objective for this is to help get people from denial to acceptance. What I saw repeatedly and what my research proved out can be a very common um, aspect of a merger and acquisition is people have a hard time letting go of the company, letting go of the old company, right?
Yeah.
They deny this is happening. It's the ostrich head in the sand. And one of the tasks of a leader is to help that team move to acceptance. I talk about it as the M&A stages of grief.
Hmm.
You deny that it's happened and you just can't accept that my company is changing and I don't know what it's changing into.
What
And
is,
so,
we don't need this logo. We have our own logo. What are you talking about?
right, yep, tomorrow you got a whole new email.
Yeah.
And so I talk about that. That is an emotion, and these are not emotions we are typically used to experiencing at work. And so in the workshop or even my keynotes, right, I joke about it. I said I tried to think back for me, what was a time where I had felt, some of these emotions, denial and anger and bargaining. I was like bad breakups, right? The breakups where it's like, you're not breaking up with me, I'm breaking up with you, right? And then you're like, the bargaining stage is, oh, maybe we should get back together. And then you realize, no, 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 we weren't right. I said, but you go through those stages of you finally accept, okay, maybe this wasn't the right relationship, and there will be the new, better relationship in the future. When you get to acceptance, it can be eye-opening, but you got to get to acceptance. And so I thought back, okay, well, when I went through those, not trying to make this all personal, Dan, but music, right? Little Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Frank Sinatra, Beatles, Rolling Stones, Little Anita Baker. And so I thought, music can help you just not only articulate how you feel, get some of the anger out, but it also can help you see that it's a stage, right? The music that just expresses where you're at and where you want to go. And I've done this even in a room of 200 people where I'll say, okay, I want you to
Wow.
create a playlist, a very quick one. Pick a song that best describes how you felt when you first heard the news. Now I want you to pick a song that describes how you feel right now, and then pick a song that best describes how you want to feel 90 days from now.
Ah,
90
lovely.
days, 6 months. And what is fascinating to me is particularly when the senior leaders share their song list, they raise their hand and they get up, and you can see people in the audience going, wow, even our CEO. There was one that I remember in particular where a CEO said the song that she felt when she first got the news was the Beatles song, Yesterday,
Oh, wow.
right? But the song that she wanted to feel moving forward was Can't Stop Believing. Uh, and so it was wonderful because it was a unifying moment. Music can really, it's a neutralizer.
Mm.
You know, it's global. I've done this in audiences around the world, and music still has the same impact. And music is known through research, right? It can help you process your feelings and get you to a place of acceptance. And so I use it in that context, and it just helps kind of break down some of the walls. And for me, that it's an important tool because it just acknowledges, I know how you feel. I've been there. But here's a way to help you just kind of understand where you are and why. But this is just a stage. And you're going to get to that stage that can't stop believing. But it's a journey. And it just helps people to really, it brings it to life quickly.
I love that. And segueing to the long and winding road, of course, in M&A. In your
It's why the Beatles is on my list. So many Beatles songs.
well, in your book now, you also discuss the cast of change characters. I'm very curious about this because there are a lot of characters who are in the cast of change.
Yes.
One of the characters, I think, that gets left at the altar in the church taxi, like way before, is sort of HR and L&D. Like this whole notion that culture, people, how we lead, how we learn, what do they have? How can we integrate? Like all this stuff about the human, people, and culture capital stuff is
Right.
nowhere near the church. So tell me a bit about the cast of characters within this and how and what you advocate for ultimately.
When, as you were saying that, so I'm thinking about the conversation you had on the boat, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that is like, so in my cast of characters, the great unifier can often be that HR leader, the L&D, in my case, marketing, comms, right? It's the people in the company who are, by nature of their role, sensitive to the people culture aspect of the company.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the
The
great
humanity.
unifier, right? The
Yeah.
great unifier can be that person. And I'm not saying they're just in those departments, right? I've seen them, they can be across the company, right? They tend to be that person who people trust, who they go to for their opinion,
Right.
uh, and who maybe you're not even on their team, but you go to Joe because Joe always has a good sense of what's happening and where we're going, and is this good? Is this a good deal or not? And if Joe's bought in, people feel like, okay, I feel like I can be okay because Joe's wicked smart. He knows the CEO, he's invested. The problem that can be, and your conversation on the boat is if Joe is seeing one side but not aware of everything out, what were the real motives for this? Why are we doing this? What's the true objective? Then the great unifier, their role is diminished because
Mhm.
people start to see that, right? They aren't paying attention to the shifting political dynamics of the company and can, as you said, can be left behind because then people don't listen to them anymore because they realize, oh, they're not in a position of power or they don't know what's going on. And I saw that all 10 characters that I brought to life are actual people who I have come across. Either I worked with them, uh, or was exposed to them in my three different M&A scenarios. And the fascinating thing for me, as you noted, there are caricatures in my book. When I was interviewing CEOs during my research, I all I had to do was show the 10 caricatures, like I would lay them out on the table, and the CEOs would instantly go, "Oh my God, I know one of these."
Oh, look, there's Jim or Jill or
Right.
Puneet, right? Yeah. Yeah.
When you read that section of my book, all of those stories were brought to life because they just saw the caricature and said, "Oh my God, I know one of these, and here's how he or she undermined the deal. Here's how he or she helped the deal. Here's how, like the one story in particular that I love is about the specialist. So the specialist can be that person who is really good at one thing in particular. They're a subject matter expert. And they can oftentimes be very destabilized because they wonder after the deal, will what I do still be valued? And a woman, she was customer marketing, and she said, what I so appreciated about my boss, because we were focused on automotive, but the company that acquired us was telecommunications.
I see.
So we weren't sure, is automotive going to be valued or not? What she hadn't appreciated was that automotive, the reason why the telecommunications company had acquired them is because they wanted to get into automotive.
Diversify.
Right. She didn't know that at the time. And so her boss said, listen, I know we know our stuff. What I don't know is that going to be valued immediately or not? Don't focus on your title. Focus first on your ability to learn quickly and the impact that you have had doing that and demonstrate that time and again. Show that value. Don't get sucked up in, hey, I'm senior director of so and so. What you want to be showing is how quickly you learn about something. Because, because they were subject matter experts, they were really smart about automotive. He said, but think about that. You can apply that to anything. It's a skill
Mm,
set. You know how to get quickly smart on something and distill it and communicate it so that people understand where the opportunities are. That's your strength. So
mm,
demonstrate that. And sure enough, their team navigated that rocky, first like 9 months while things were kind of settling down to show how smart they were in just learning about an industry. And sure enough, it turned out automotive was incredibly important. But they survived that messy middle by showing their value. And that was thanks to a leader. I, for me, those cast of change characters show up repeatedly, and you can actually morph through a couple of them. I've had a number of times where people in the audience will say, "Oh, I know someone who was both a know-it-all and then became a dominatrix," and and like I've seen these personalities, morph over time. Um, and the other thing, Dan, that I think it's important because I've had this asked of me, like you show like these look like nefarious caricatures. They're not all.
yeah.
But the important thing is to highlight that you don't always see the best side of people when they're uncertain of their future, right? It's a natural human nature, right? You want to protect yourself and your turf. And so what I wanted to do through this, and there's a reason why they're caricatures, is to just humanize it, right? This is how we might show up, how we might see other people show up. Understanding what the drivers and motivations are for this type of a persona is a critical first step,
Mm.
particularly as a leader. If you've got some of these people on your team, how do you help them get through that again to acceptance? So that's why I have a cast of change characters that I brought to life.
Well, I do love them. And in each of those characters, I think one of the things that you point out, or I know that you do in your work, is sort of the understanding of what it is that we should be thinking about from the talent perspective. So I'm the HR PNC guy, and so I'm thinking now, all right, these characters, each of them have to be thinking about both the top talent or just talent that either they've acquired or the team in which that is on the acquiree side. They're like, well, things are going to change on the top talent side, that is the existing company as well. So tell me a bit about, again, the dance that has to happen between what leaders need to be thinking about to not just retain talent or top talent, but just the uncertainty of what people are going through, and how talent needs to be further up the line of things to consider during these M&A episodes.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've done throughout my work the onboarding of a company in an acquisition, or frankly even mergers, right? And they're called
Yeah,
mergers, but you and I both know it's
we get
always
it.
an
Yeah, we
acquisition.
get it.
But and working with actually HR talent acquisition leaders, and thankfully, right, I tend to, through the work that I do, I attract people who are like-minded, who say, yes, Jennifer, we need to be smarter about this. And so they recognize immediately when you're onboarding people through an acquisition, it's a very different onboarding experience, and you've got to think about it differently. This isn't a group of people who all interview to join your company are and excited to be a part of it. This is a group of people who've had it happen to them. They are being acquired. And
Mm,
so that onboarding experience, first acknowledging, hey, we want them to feel welcome, but it's got to go past the, hey, here's a mug and a t-shirt with my company logo on it and your company logo saying, better together. That's all good and well, but
yeah,
it's got to go past that. And so one of the things I've done, and I think you and I even talked about this, was the Culture Buddies
yeah.
program, right? How do we, and it's assigning people a culture buddy to help you get a sense of not only the culture you're coming into, but equally it's a two-way street. And the way I talk about it is if you want culture integration to work, think like a tourist, a good tourist, right? How do you learn each other's language? how do you help share with each other the unique things that you bring to this? And when you have a culture buddy, and the thing, one of the first exercises, like we'll have a list of, hey, here's things to think about as culture buddies. It's sharing with each other your acronyms. And you can always have a good laugh. Like the random acronyms that we have, what's the same thing that you have, but you use different acronyms. But it's getting to know each other's language, but then also like how to navigate internally. Because there's always those formal processes, but then what are the informal ones? And
Mm.
culture buddies can help you better see, okay, how do I navigate this to get things done? Who are really the people I need to talk to? How do I get smart about this? And so one of the more powerful things, and it shouldn't just be your Fortune 500 companies. It doesn't have to be, only the big merger or acquisition deals. I've seen Culture Buddies programs work when it's a company of 100 people,
Mm.
right? But just trying to help them learn to navigate. And it reflects, again, respect for the employees that you are onboarding. It says you have value. We want to retain that value. We want to help you better understand our company quickly. Because HR leaders in particular say, I know we've always got a lot of paperwork and people can feel overwhelmed and bombarded. How do we highlight the good things about our company? Not just, hey, here are your vacation days, like here are your comp and benefits. How do I quickly show? And one of the ways to do that is assigning them immediately a culture buddy, someone who can just help them figure out what the company is, but equally want to know, so what is it about your company that you like, and how can we work together?
So good. I mean, I could talk with you for hours. I mean, there's so many other ways. We're gonna have you on again to go deeper. And I think the best way to describe this conversation and even the culture buddies, even now what, even all the incredible advice you've given so far is the Beatles song, of course, Jennifer, and that is "Come Together." Can we agree?
Yeah, absolutely. You've essentially like picked all the Beatles songs that I have on my playlist, which you can find on Spotify.
Excellent. Well, we'll put those in the show notes. So, as the author of Now What, A Survivor's Guide for Thriving Through Mergers and Acquisitions, and the founder and chief humanity officer of Day1 Ready, Jennifer Fondrevay, where can we find out more about you?
I can only handle so many platforms, Dan. So really, if you want to find me, I hang out on LinkedIn. That's where I share advice, not just about mergers and acquisitions, but just observations on life and navigating uncertainty, because God knows we're all facing uh, enormous uncertainty. I talk about all of the things that I've learned over time. So really LinkedIn. And then if you want to find out more about my services, my website, jenniferjfondrevay.com.
Ms. Fondrevay, what a treat. We're going to have you back because there's much more to cover. But first of all, I just want to say not just thanks for showing up today, but thanks for doing what you do, because we do need a little more Jennifers in this world for executives and leaders who are going through M&A to understand that, yeah, we could put a little more chief humanity into the office of these M&As. And I think what the work that you're doing is highlighting and instilling and inculcating that genre, that notion that humanity is needed, because there's so many people that go through the sandpaper, friction, quicksand, insanity tornado of these acquisitions. They're not going to stop, but we can do better. We can do better from a human relationship and integration perspective. And remember that we all are humans through these things. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on. I'm always thankful, particularly Dan, because you've gone through the experience of a merger and acquisition, and it just helps get the message out there that it can be done a different way, and frankly, a better way that leads to the same end goals, right? You still have success, but you treat people in a way that gets you there faster.
Amen to that. And Come Together Indeed is the title of this episode for sure, which we'll do once we get into post editing. Jennifer
Thank
Fondrevay,
you.
thank you so much for this. And for those that watched or listened, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontefract.